What's up, everybody? Welcome to DFS by the Numbers. These are my NFL DFS Week 3 core plays. Going to get my favorite 2, 3, 4 players from each position that stick out from the midweek perspective here. And then, of course, Saturday or earlier, I'll be getting out my full player pool along with talking some strategy along the way in that video. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on that. Also, leave a like on the video if you do enjoy the content. That'd be much, much appreciated. And I say we get into it, starting with the quarterbacks. And for me, there's a lot of quarterbacks that stick out. I'll talk about them later in the week. But I guess the one that really does stick out to me, and probably for a lot of people, is going to be Kyler Murray, who is 8,300, going against Jacksonville here. So it's a very good matchup, 51.5 point total, where they are 7-point favorites. And yeah, Murray's averaging 36.3 DraftKings points per game thus far in these first two games. Great matchup here against Jacksonville with some rushing yard upside, rushing touchdown upside as well. I believe he has 2 touchdowns on the ground so far this year. Only 10 rushing attempts this year as well, which is a little bit concerning, but he's always going to have a ton of rushing upside week in and week out. I like the great stacking options as well. You have Rondale Moore, who has been very, very good. We'll talk about him later in the video, and then also DeAndre Hopkins as well. And like I said, a decently high total, 51.5. There are other games that have 55-point game totals, like the Seattle game, like the Chiefs game, and like the Tampa Bay game. But still, I think Murray's in a great spot here with a great matchup, and I do like him. Debating him for cash, and another guy I do like is going to be Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson going against Detroit here, another spot where I really love the matchup. It is a 49.5 point game total where the Baltimore Ravens are going to be 9-point favorites, and he is 7,800, so you are getting a $500 savings off of Kyler Murray, and he is averaging 28.6 DraftKings points per week. He did have a poor game to start off the year, but definitely did bounce back against Kansas City last week, scoring a ton of DraftKings points and getting a ton of rushing yards around along the way. 107 rushing yards, 37.26 DraftKings points against Kansas City. I think it's another great spot here for Lamar Jackson to go out there and do very well. Yeah, like I said, probably between Murray or Lamar Jackson and cash for me this week. It's I like both guys' rushing yard upside. I like both guys' matchups this week as well. And there are some other quarterbacks we'll touch on later in the week, but yeah, those are the two that are sticking out to me the most. And yeah, it's a week where I'm probably going to pay up at quarterback. I'm probably going to pay up at running back. And there is a lot of value at wide receiver and tight end that I do like this week. So we'll move on to running back. And Dalvin Cook, so he is questionable, is a little beat up. But if he does play, I'm going to be very, very high on Dalvin Cook this week. So Dalvin Cook, he is going against Seattle here at 55.5 point total, where the Vikings are 1.5 point underdogs, and he is averaging 20.6 DraftKings points thus far in these two games. Highest total on the slate, with a solid matchup against the Detroit or the Seattle defense, who has given up the most DraftKings points to opposing running backs thus far. And he has at least 20 carries in 2 games thus far. So he's going to get the opportunity. I guess the injury is definitely a concern. We'll have to monitor that. But if he is good to go, I really do like Dalvin Cook. There aren't a lot of running backs I like this week. It's very weird in terms of running back. I think I'm just going to pay up and get these studs up top, like a Dalvin Cook or like an Austin Eckler, who I'm very high on this week as well. Was high on him last week. There was some concerns with what happened in week 1 with Eckler. 0 targets, 0 receptions, but he came back and got 9 targets, 9 receptions, the good old Eckler we know and love. And Eckler here, he's going to be going against the Kansas City Chiefs in a 55-point game total, where the Chargers are 6.5-point underdogs. He has 7,200, so you do get a decent savings off of guys like Cook, guys like Henry, and he is averaging 17.1 DraftKings points per game. And I love the game script here for Eckler. The Chargers should be trailing, which should lead to more targets and more receptions for Eckler, and a really great matchup against the Chiefs defense as well. So yeah, this game definitely has potential to be a shootout, and I do think Eckler is going to be heavily involved in the running game and in the passing game especially, and that's going to rack up some reception points as well, which I do like a lot. Austin Eckler is a play I like quite a bit. Going down, and like I said, like this range in running backs, like the 6,000 range is so tough. There are some plays that stick out, but I think SAQUON Barkley is very interesting this week. So he's going against Atlanta. You have a 47.5 point game total, where the Giants are going to be 3-point favorites. So positive game script there. And he is 6,500, averaging only 6.3 DraftKings points per week. He has been beat up He's been playing a lot of snaps, but he has been beat up. He has not been looking like himself. But, he has a good, 9-10 days of rest here. And if Barkley is at full health, this is a matchup where he very well can break out and, have a very good day against this Atlanta defense. It will be his easiest matchup by far, and it really is not even close. Washington, very solid defense. Denver Broncos, a very solid defense as well. The Atlanta Falcons is a horrible defense, to be honest. So I think Barkley, if Barkley does not do it this game, I have serious concerns about him going on throughout the year, but I think it's a really good bounce back spot for Barkley. Like I said, the extra days of rest I think is huge, and then this matchup is huge as well. I think Barkley does get back on track, and at 6,500 just seems way too cheap. If he indeed does come in fully healthy, I do think it's a good spot for him. So we will go to the wide receiver position now, and wide receiver is stacked this week, and I like a ton of wide receiver plays. We'll touch on all of them later in the week, but Cooper KUPP, 6,800 here. He has been on fire, to say the least, and it's a game script that I do like here for Cooper KUPP. He's going to be 1.5-point underdogs, the Rams are, and a 55-point game total against this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, who I'm not all that high on, especially in terms of their passing defense, and KUPP has averaged a massive 33.3 DraftKings points per week, and he just seems, to be honest, way too cheap here, especially considering the total and the matchup. 21 targets through 2 games with 16 receptions, and he's totaled 271 yards. I think the Rams have looked good. I think Stafford has looked good. Speaking of Stafford, I'll also be having some Stafford stacks as well with KUPP and Woods, who's very cheap as well. Woods is like 5,700, but yeah, Cooper KUPP, I like him a lot. I think he's way too cheap, especially for how he's been performing, and I do think it keeps it up in this matchup against Tampa Bay in a high-scoring game that has potential to be a shootout. So Keenan Allen, who is 6,600, doing very well this year. Also going against Kansas City here, 55-point game total, where the Chargers are 6.5-point underdogs. And like I said, he is 6,600, averaging 19.9 DraftKings points per week. And Mike Williams is also in play for me. I think is like 200 cheaper than Keenan Allen, but I like Allen here quite a bit in a game that they are projected to be trailing. They are projected to be throwing the ball more than likely, and you can always count on Keenan Allen for high target, high reception upside. And again, he seems way too cheap. 6,600 is way too cheap for Keenan Allen. He actually got priced down after last week. Last week he was 7,000. Week 1 he was 6,900. So he's 6,600 now, and that makes absolutely no sense to me, considering they're playing Kansas City, who has a horrific passing defense, in a great game script, in a 55-point game total, and he got priced down from the first 2 weeks. Makes no sense. So yeah, I like Keenan Allen quite a bit. One of my favorite plays on the entire slate in terms of value at wide receiver. I think that's way too cheap there. Moving along, speaking of value, Marvin Jones Jr. for Jacksonville going against Arizona, 51.5-point game total, 7-point underdogs the Jaguars are, so I do like that. He is 4,900, and he is averaging 18.1 DraftKings points per week thus far. And yeah, it's a great matchup and a great game script here for Jones in a game that they'll be trailing. He is the number 1 wide receiver clearly for the Jaguars, has 21 targets in the first 2 games this week. So yeah, I do like Marvin Jones Jr. quite a bit. Has looked very good against Houston, 18.7 DraftKings points. And then against Denver, he had 17.5 DraftKings points, 11 targets in week 2, and then 9 targets in week 1. And I think the target share is going to be about the same this week in a game that they're probably going to be trailing. I think Murray and the Cardinals are going to get out ahead early, and I think Jacksonville is going to be playing catch up. Kind of like how they have been. So I do like Marvin Jones at 4,900. So the last one I'll talk about, and we'll touch on some other guys that are cheaper than Moore, but I think Moore is a really solid option here. Going against Jacksonville as well, 51.5-point game total, where the Cardinals are going to be 7-point favorites. So interestingly enough, I know it's only 2 games, but he is leading the Cardinals with targets on the year. Hopkins actually has 12. Great stacking option with Murray if you do want to get there, and a solid price, and obviously a phenomenal matchup against this Jaguars defense. So Randall Moore is somebody that did stick out. He is averaging 19.1 DraftKings points thus far. He's been looking very, very good, and again, 13 targets. Hopkins 12 targets, so that's very interesting to mention there. So I do like Randall Moore. I think he's a cheap stacking option for Kyler Murray there, and just a great option in general at that price. And then quickly getting into tight ends, T.J. Hockenson, and there's a ton of tight ends that stick out this week. Obviously, Kelsey is in play every single week. Darren Waller, Gronkowski's been looking phenomenal, but TJ Hockenson is somebody I really have my eye on. Going against Baltimore, 49.5-point game total, where Detroit's going to be 9-point underdogs, which I believe is one of the biggest underdogs on the slate, and he's averaging 23.2 DraftKings points per week. I think he's way too cheap at 5,200. Great game script here for Hockenson in a game they project to be losing by 9 points, project to be trailing. Baltimore has given up the most points to tight ends thus far in the first 2 weeks. I think it's a great spot for Hockenson. I do like him as a run back option in terms of the Baltimore stacks. I like Lamar Jackson. I like Marquise Brown stacks. And I think Hockenson's going to be a phenomenal option this week at 5,200. I think he's going to get a lot of action in the game that, like I said, I think they're going to be trailing. So give me Hockenson at that price tag. And then finally, the last guy that did stick out to me in terms of a tight end, I went to him last week. It almost worked out, and that's Jared Cook. He is 3,900. I think he's the same price as last week. Yeah, same price as last week. I'm going right back there. Of course, he is playing the Kansas City Chiefs, 55-point game total, 6.5-point dogs, and he's averaging 8.2 DraftKings points thus far in his 2 games, and just a cheap option here in a high-scoring game where the Chargers are projected to be trailing. 13 targets in 2 games. That's pretty good for his price tag. And he also had a touchdown last week that was called back. So although he did score 5.8, it very well could have looked a lot better than that. So that sucked, but yeah, I think Jared Cook's another great option in a game that's going to be more than likely a shootout, as the majority of the Chiefs games are. I like Jared Cook in terms of maybe stacking option with Justin Herbert, maybe Justin Herbert stacks with Cook and Allen. Mike Williams is somebody else to consider as well, and that game in general is something I want to target. As far as defenses, we'll talk about them later in the week when I get my full player pool out. It's going to be a week where I do pay down at defense, and we'll just touch on what those are later in the week. So yeah, guys, that's about it. Those are my core plays. Those are the guys that are sticking out to me the most. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you do enjoy the content. Also subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Going to be getting out more NFL content, showdown content, and then also my full player pool video later in the week where I go over my full player pool, my kind of strategy for cash and tournaments and just stuff like that. So that's about it, guys. Good luck for week 3. Let's make some money. See you guys.